Hello, my name is Devin Cairns again, and this is video 3 of the series going over implementing subsurface carbon processes and simulating these reactions with at a watershed scale with the reactive transport model BioRT-HBV. And so video 3 is coming after a video where we just went over how to implement shallow soil respiration processes in the model. In this video will cover implementing deep zone soil respiration processes, and we will look at the effect adding this deep zone respiration process has in terms of our stream carbon chemistry dynamics. And so we'll actually end up going through this video a little bit faster than the last two. We're just going to go over what we change in the input files, look at the input files really quickly, run the model, and then look at the output generated from the model, and then compare the model output to a model where we only had shallow zone respiration processes implemented versus the model that has shallow zone and deep zone respiration processes implemented. And so in terms of our model setup, again, we're implementing our soil respiration in this shallow soil zone, but then we're also implementing a deep zone respiration process in this deep zone portion of our model. And so how do we represent this in BioRT-HBV? Again, we're using kind of this lumped respiration reaction. And so in the deeper zone, in terms of respiration, we can have so we do still have autotrophic and heterotrophic respiration happening in the deeper zone, although most literature and most historical literature has really considered shallow zone respiration processes, especially when considering the production of dissolved carbon constituents. The shallow zone tends to have higher amounts of labile organic matter, as well as oxygen availability. And so this tends to produce more dissolved carbon components. However, more recent literature and some of our modeling work has pointed on to the importance of these deep zone respiration processes. In some systems, they're finding respiration rates as high as the shallow zone in these deeper zone areas where we previously thought roots don't go down deep enough, as well as the organic carbon down there has been considered more recalcitrant. However, we're starting to find that this may not be the case. Microbes are still degrading. There is a longer residence time down there too, so it allows more time to degrade these more recalcitrant materials, as well as finding that roots are rooting deeper and actually contributing in terms of respiration. So how we represent this in the model is we have the translocated DOC. So any DOC that's been produced in this shallow soil zone, and since we mostly deal with modeling headwater streams, we don't have any trans-basin input of water. So all the water in the deeper zone has really flown through this shallow zone, carrying shallow zone chemistry with it. So we actually have inputs of fresh organic matter into this deeper zone via DOC. So our reaction can consume this translocated DOC as an electron donor. And if there's not enough electron donor in terms of this translocated DOC, we have also allowed the model to source electron donor from other deep organic carbon sources. This could be petrogenic carbon or this older what has traditionally been seen as more recalcitrant carbon. And we really represent the mineralization of these two organic carbon components into carbon dioxide. Again, we use a Monod reaction rate law, and we make the assumption that we have no limiting substrate. Even though the deeper zone is more saturated, tends to not have much oxygen diffusion to this depth, we still assume that there's ample electron acceptors. And because the residence time is long enough, we assume that there will be an ample enough time for these slower reactions to happen as well. So in the end, we have a very similar reaction rate law as we had for the shallow zone respiration, where we have the reaction rate is a product of the kinetic rate constant, the surface area of the reactive solid phase, temperature dependence, soil moisture dependence, and water table depth dependence. So in terms of modifying input files, we will basically modify the same input files as we did for shallow soil respiration. Our chemistry, where we tell the model what species and reactions to look for, our database file, our initial conditions, and our precipitation chemistry input files. So in terms of our chemistry file, again, make sure our reactions are turned on. However, then we'll add primary species into our list. And so I notice here there's secondary species added. That's okay. You can add OH, you cannot add OH at this point, but the model will still run regardless. But we do, if we want to simulate our deep zone respiration reaction, we need to make sure that we include the primary species from that reaction. So our solid phase, since this is a kinetically controlled reaction, we have to list our solid phase as a primary species, and then the product of that reaction. And again, the product is just carbon dioxide, which we already have listed as a primary species here. So we're good to go. And again, we need to make sure that we list as a mineral kinetic reaction down here. So we have our organic carbon in the deep zone solid phase and our associated label. So again, we check that our primary species are all there. We check our reaction network again. And again, if you want to go through all these numbers, what they mean, we did that in video 2A. We check our kinetics block. So we check that we've told the model to look for our solid phases. We make sure that our labels match. And again, this label says default, but if you want to look at changing that, we did that in video 2B to run our reaction. And then we can also look here that our organic carbon in the deep zone label test, which matches in our mineral kinetic block, and the type is monod. Again, we will set up our initial condition file, and we list all of our primary species in this initial condition file. And so the only line we actually need to add is the line for our solid phase. So our organic carbon deep zone solid in each of our zones. So the precipitation zone, the upper zone or the shallow soil zone, and the lower zone or the deeper zone. So again, we set these values pretty low for precipitation. In the upper zone, we set it to essentially 0 since we want this to only represent the organic carbon decomposition or transformation that happened in the deeper zone. And we'll set the specific surface area to 0 here. So this reaction rate should essentially be 0 in the shallow zone. And then in the deeper zone, we'll set this to a higher volume fraction, a higher surface area, since this is the organic carbon phase that we want to be consumed in the deeper zone. And we set the log KEQ. The temperature threshold is set to 1, so it's essentially turned off. And that's mostly to represent the fact that this is happening deeper in the ground, so the temperature is more stable throughout the year. And then we have soil moisture sensitivity, and then some sensitivity to water table depth as well, represented by this N alpha value.